if you ask them what to do, in what order to put, then there's linking words. When do you use however? When do you use, how do you link sentences? Pulling together thoughts to say this happens, this happens, this happens, and as a descriptive, try and get that logic out.
Okay, but so to what extent are you going to address that problem?
I'm not going to deal with writing. I think the problem is a lot of research scaffolding deals with writing support. Okay. And it's very specific to what a person's need is. And if I had my way, I would have put the whole lot through up to a certain level. There's some really good, the Wits Language School does wonderful courses that they take people in to get to a certain competence level. I would believe that that's a requirement before I even speak to them. But unfortunately, you may not discriminate based on language. But then language is the main vehicle that you transfer thoughts. So it's very difficult to do that. What we're trying to do is we're not trying to get people to write long paragraphs and sentences at this point, down to bullet points, so that at least it's as clear as possible. But in the process, I should get that back, and it should be very, very clear that your supervisor is not the editor.
So that MOU that they're going to agree with you, please make sure that you put in there that you expect the student to edit their own work.
I know of supervisors, especially the kind of supervisor that's sort of at the high end and everybody wants them, demand that no piece of work come to them without having been formally edited.
But they need help. One of the proposed suggestions which we made earlier, we pay at the end. Okay. Now, I'm trying to work with some editors and telling them that, look, this student will come to you. However, can you help him or her during proposal writing? So some are volunteering, some are not. But if we have a bigger pool and bigger resource, with me say I have 2, 4, 5 students and I'm telling 1 or 2, so they are willing. But that could be one of the mechanisms. Because we have to give students help. They can't afford even 10.
But is there support sessions at the university?
No, that's the one thing. As soon as I get the results from RIA in terms of how they did, what I will do is I will contact our language center, and I will see to what extent they can help us. Because look, we have a language center, but they mostly deal with first-year students. But the point is that they need to also start developing something for our postgraduate students. So I will go and speak to them and see. Because this isn't your job. This isn't what.
Well, it would be really, really scary if it was my job.
So you can't do everything. That's the. Okay. So here's a methodology choice. We've already discussed that. Is whoever wrote this, are you happy that we've discussed it? Okay. Constructing a research title.
Okay, we are going to deal with that tomorrow. Basically, the moment the student has gotten their research problem, exactly the same words get beaten up to form your research aim, because a problem is something, therefore an aim is something in order to, and it's pretty much the same things. And those terminology, those words, the same words, at least 2 variables, a relationship, all those rules, gets used in your title. So what I'm also going to deal with the students is that if you move your research problem, the moment you move your research problem and you do not align your title with that, it causes immense frustration to any audience. So that we try and get them to get their problem clearly defined early on, so that you don't have regular title changes. One of the main indicators for students that they're about to leave or to stop is around frequent title changes, not focus changes, but frequent title changes and frequent topic changes. So
just to add, the other issue is when a student brings a proposal, we give comments as a supervisor. Now what happens is some of the comments have effect throughout the proposal. Students normally don't do that. They will only fix that part and leave the abstract or many
Okay.
things as it is. So we must emphasize.
Yeah,
that.
but that's why we are doing this. We're dealing with your problem statement, and you have a formal rubric against which you will give feedback. The students have a record. They have to, in a table, keep up to date what feedback they received when and what was done about it. And that record has to be signed off by the supervisor.
That is fine. Look, when
But so you need to check on that very solidly that they do that. And then what we do is then they can rework. So we don't let them go forward. So based on that feedback, the next assignment, until assignment 4, they have to rephrase their research problem based on the feedback. So only at around assignment 4 do you have what can then be translated into a title.
no, which is fine. What I'm saying is this. Sometimes it becomes into debate.
Yeah.
I did what you said. You said all these. I have changed. But the implications of those comments also have to be taken care into the proposal,
Yeah.
which they don't do.
No, but that is why we have the systematic. You know, the thing is that we don't want somebody to write a 20-page document and start to give feedback on that 20-page document. Then it's very difficult. Then you basically want to take little bits and move them physically around. You want them to slowly evolve their thoughts so that they put them together. And the frame of feedback is so that they have to take on board what you give, and that is then translated into everything else they do further.
Okay.
Because if they don't do that, I mean, it's as you say, you get a 20-page document, you sit there, you breathe, you drink a glass of red wine, you read a little bit more, then it gets to whiskey, then and then you think of ways to say, "You blinking idiot," in nice words. So, and you don't keep, you know, that's after you started correcting the basic.
That's after the whiskey.
It's after the whiskey and basic spelling mistakes. And if I can pick up spelling mistakes, it's bad. It's really bad. So, yeah, we try to deal with that, but it is important. And I think I will emphasize on the students that, you know, because through the model, it is you can't. The whole thing is not linear in the form of the scientific method. It's a cyclical process, but there's still got to be alignment. And if you move anything in any element, it impacts massively up and
That
down.
is what is happening.
Yeah. So we're dealing with that concept very much, because the moment that line is not there, then
It
people
is
say something, the logic is missing,
Yeah,
the
there's
focus
no
at shift.
thread.
You have, all those wonderful words. It only implies.
Okay, so the next one is format and language. So we've just dealt with the language. The format is another issue. And I will make a proposal to the FHDC this week that we actually get somebody to draw up a template for us with styles and everything, which will then make the formatting easier for the students. But that's one of the supplementary items for tomorrow's meeting. Okay. Okay, but the language I think we've dealt with, but I think,
Yeah.
Rio, one of the things we must tell the students tomorrow is that whenever they do anything in Word, they must make sure that they have the language and spell checker on.
On South African
On South
English.
African. Well, that it's on firstly,
Yeah.
and secondly that it's on South African English.
Yeah.
So maybe if you can just show
Yeah.
them tomorrow how to do
Will
that,
do.
because yeah,
No, that's quite scary.
yeah, because I mean, my BTEC students don't even know how to do that. Okay, need to know how to do a literature review and write in an organized manner. So we've discussed the write in an organized manner. So I hope you guys are comfortable that we're trying to achieve that.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. and
Okay,
here's
on the
another language
literature,
support,
yeah.
which I
On the
just-
literature review, the process that we go through, and if you look at that assignment 4, it really takes the students, in assignment 3, they have to identify the literature objectives. So the objectives of that literature should be clearly identified. And then what I make them do is I make them write their literature review as a piece of research. So you start on with what's the objectives, to answer your literature question, to provide background to your overall area, to prove that there's a gap in the knowledge if you're at a D level, to start by giving the history of that area, answer the literature questions, give background to your empirical questions, support your assumptions, you know, those kind of things. Oh yes, and do definitions. So it's absolutely, there's a very formal structure. Do this in this order, and it will and tell me what you're going to do from the beginning. So I try, because the literature reviews are hell to read as well. I mean,
Yes.
you read them little bits by little bits, and then you try and work on how on earth are they linked in any which way that I can make my sense out of.
But can we also get that, do they get a format?
You got it. You got it.
Yeah.
And you'll get this, yeah.
Yes.
And you,
Last time, I don't know were you in the last workshop?
Oh, was
In the handout, yeah.
but you can
Okay.
also attend when we do literature review. I think that would be that was quite a lot of work when I started developing that, because there are methodologies for doing a literature review. They're not many, and you don't find literature on how to do a literature review. The ability to put discriminators in the search is very difficult. But yeah,
Yeah.
we've built up some. I've got quite a bit of it. So
Okay, so just to reiterate, I've sent all of you the invitation to join the wiki. All the sessions that we do with you guys and with the students are recorded and are available on the wiki. So if at any stage you want to know anything that Ria or I have said to the students, it is available over there. Okay. And so it's also like if a student misses a session, they can go and re-look at it. And some of the students, while they're busy doing it, they also go and they re-look it. So we did a session already on how to read, because before the holidays we wanted to get the students reading. So their assignment for the holidays was read. Okay. So it's not particularly focused at this stage. We just wanted them to find things and start reading. So that tomorrow night when she does the objectives and the problem statement, they know at least what it is they want to research. So if you get these confused students coming to you at the moment and saying, I'm reading but I'm confused, then say to them, that's fine, you're supposed to.
that is
Okay.
that's the appropriate
Monday-
place to be.
Yes.
They were a bit
Monday
shocked.
My office was like a train station and I had all these confused students. And I kept saying to them, it's fine, you're just where you're supposed to be. Okay, then in terms of the library assistants, last week in the holidays, we had 2 sessions in the library where the library people showed them the databases, showed them how to use the databases, showed them EndNote, showed them Google Scholar, all of that stuff. Those sessions were also recorded. Actually, not those ones, my student ones were recorded, and they are available on the wiki. So the students have no excuse anymore on using the library. Okay. Sorry, I'll get you. The problem is, the only problem that there is there are some of them that are not registered yet. Because remember, they're allowed to do the workshop without being registered. So the ones that are not registered yet have been told that what they must do is they must identify articles that they need to read using Google Scholar, because in Google Scholar you can get enough information to see whether this article is applicable, and then send that list either to their supervisor or to me. And then we will get the library guys to search for those articles. And the library is quite good in doing that. I've had quite a few requests sent through this year, and within 2-3 days they come back with the articles. Okay, sorry, AJ, you had a question or a
The
comment?
point here I was making is training is okay when students get training, they know how to access. The problem starts when they don't get the full text journal article.
Yeah.
If you and I send, the librarian immediately responds.
Yes.
But we have enough large number, we can't be a proper channel for them. And their complaint is when they send to librarian directly, they never get response.
Oh, okay.
So that's one of the issues I am listening from many students, and I as a supervisor cannot always channel it. So
Okay,
either
I
we
will
increase the
follow it
librarians
up with the library as well. I'll go and see who is the person I must speak to there, and I will follow it
no,
up.
they say yes, but then at the end, and I have got
Well, then what
no
I will do
response
is I will
emails.
get the students to CC the supervisor of the library people as well, until
what-
we get it to work.
I think the problem is the librarians are not enough. They are in number to cater us, but they are not able to cater the
For the
students.
students, yeah.
So either they increase the manpower to
Okay,
respond to them.
the other thing which is also on the FHDC for tomorrow is we have a research lab on the 4th floor in building 30, and there are computers in it and they are connected to the internet. So my proposal is that we appoint a full-time PhD or master's or both student to sit there to keep control of the lab and that we make that lab available to our postgraduate students. Because I think that some of the students, the problem is they don't have access to an internet connection where they can go and do a database search.
But
And-
these are two different things.
Yeah. No, it is two different things, but it's also something which will probably help.
Because the other thing is, some of the passwords library is not willing to part with
Mm.
this. So-
Yeah, but so the thing is, if they're sitting on campus and they're connected via the
No, it's
TUT
still-
in-
no, it's
internet,
still-
then
it's still
there's
they
more
want
access.
Slightly
than,
more,
yeah.
but those which are blocked, they can
Yeah.
only
But the thing is,
librarians
if there are things that are blocked, I will also go and talk to the library and say, well, look, we've got this lab here. What can we do? You know what I'm
So
saying?
they will
So-
not give it. We have tried for our.
Yeah, but they can probably give that password to, say, the postgrad student if they, that is.
No, they are not willing to give us. They say, look, these are strictly controlled for this.
Yes,
that.
I can understand
Okay,
that
but then in
sometimes
those
with,
ones-
st-
those
with,
ones
with
they do have to
academics.
assist with.
Academics are not known for their keeping the discipline around that. But if you get that maybe to a specific delegated person, which is then linked to the library, they might relax it.
Let's see. if it-
Okay, so there's writing skills. Okay, then data collection support. Oh, sorry, I forgot about you. Oh, sorry. Keith had a-
Just
Keith
on
had a
on
problem.
On the library,
Yes.
I think, and this is my student situation, the student expects the library to do the keyword search thing,
No,
to get hold of the articles, to
No.
download them, and give it to her.
no. The keyword
The,
search
stu-
is a
the
no-no.
student's an MTech student. The student
Yeah.
should be doing this themselves.
Yes.
So I think the students need to understand what the actual expectations are,
Yeah.
what they need to do, what the library
Mm.
service is, and yes, they are understaffed.
Yes. But the thing is, I tell my students, if you tell me what is the author, the year, the title, the journal, the volume, then I will send it to the library. But don't send me keyword searches. That's
Yeah.
not the library's job.
Look, I had a situation with the same student last year. We contacted the library, they got hold of the 2 articles for us, which was great. But I think for current literature review, she's expecting the library to do more than what they should be doing.
No, but then you must orientate the student.
Yeah, we were in the process of that.
That's not
yesterday.
recorded, huh?
Yeah, it's done.
Conducted by the library.
Yes, but we did that last week with this specific group of students. We dedicated 2 days and they went to the library, those that could. And that has been recorded. So the training, we've done the training. We've put that, we've enabled them to be able to do that.
Yeah, the library can help them with 5 or 10 articles.
Yeah.
But because they are short-staffed, they cannot do the
Yeah.
30 articles that's
No,
expected.
no. And that's not right. I mean, that's what Google Scholar is there for.
They can't do 30, but they are not supplying the full text. That is the problem.
Yeah, but they
No,
don't
should
have
be able
to.
to supply the full text if you send them the right information.
That's the complaint I have
Okay.
directly from the students.
They don't. But okay, the volume on the MBAs are quite high. I mean, that's
No,
another.
but there is a librarian. There is a librarian dedicated for the school.
Mm.
And when I send, she gives in 24 hours.
Yeah.
But when a student sends, it doesn't come.
Okay, then the last one is data collection support, but that is now actually in the next phase that we are still going to talk about. So I'm going to let this one stand over, and the next time we have a gap again, maybe at the end of today, if you guys still have some time, we can look at the next phase and we can look at what you think the students require. But I think this is very helpful. I don't know if it's helpful for you, but it's definitely helpful for me because I need to understand what we need before I can, meet the needs. Okay. So Ria, thank you. I will hand over to you on ethics.
Okay.
Sorry, you must get
Marie-Louise,
yes.
there is just something that I'd like to mention before Ria starts.
Yes.
You know what my concern really is? I think if we look at today, my concern is really the thing that the inexperienced supervisors in our faculty, there is nobody here today. The few of us here are the experienced ones.
You know why the,
I'm the inexperienced one as well.
No.
But,
No,
but
we
the
always
majority
learn,
of them are
but-
not here.
Where is the attendance register, please? Did I give to you last week? Oh, here you go. On my computer. Yeah, I don't know what to say. I've said sent out the schedule, I sent out a reminder, so
No, no,
I'll take it up with
I'm
Edgar.
saying there's-
And those of you that are in positions where you can, shall we say, motivate people,
Exert
do so.
pressure.
because I mean, I don't have any authority. I'm just the facilitator.
It's not that we don't need, you always learn something.
That's
It's not,
what I was
I'm
going to
not
say, you
referring to
always
that.
learn.
Yeah.
We always learn new things.
Yes. No, I agree with you. But I think that's very important because the whole reason why we also decided to have supervisor workshops is for calibration. Because half of the problem in the faculty that we get at the FHDC level, because that's my experience, is that we don't have a common understanding. So part of these workshops, the purpose is to calibrate. So we need the experienced guys, because the experienced guys have to say, yes, this will work, or no, that won't work in our environment, you understand? But we also need the less experienced guys, and so thank you for those of you that are less experienced that are here, because you also need to contribute and then also learn. Okay, but I will take this up with Edgar and see if there isn't a way that we can have a little bit more authority given. Because I don't have authority, I'm only the facilitator.
Maggie, to say something
Yeah,
about supervisors' attendance.
yeah.
I know, I think it's within this month, there is this other one.
Yes, next week is another one.
Can it in?
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
We've got
Okay.
2 this month. Next week is the one on how to actually mark the assignments, and that one is absolutely essential because if the supervisors aren't here, they're not going to know how to give the feedback. And then the second one is alternative.
I am not there next week.
You've got colloquiums.
The next week's
We have exams, marking and all this.
Okay.
Yeah, we must maybe move it a little bit. Because I think it's important that
Okay,
all
I'll
have
send
to. You know, the other thing is that on Thursday do you have colloquium on Thursday, the whole day? But on Thursday I will be in on the Thursday from lunch. This Thursday I have a problem. One of my big buddies is doing his oral defense, his public defense tomorrow. So at metallurgical engineering.
Yeah,
So
if
I'll
it could work for you, maybe what we should do is then have 2 sessions next week.
yeah, that we
The Wednesday and the Thursday, so that we then accommodate everybody and then nobody can say they can't attend. I don't know, what do you think, Johan?
I'm not yet next week. They're all next week. Sorry, but you
Let's
can't
have
accommodate
recording
me.
for some, because we are attending all. If we can have recording,
So, okay, well, and I mean, the bottom line is there is a backup.
yes.
Yeah.
Come on with our backup, so.
Because if people
We
are
will
not,
check the videos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
if people are not attending, those who are attending should not be penalized for their non-attendance.
Yes. Exactly.
If
my
they-
worry is that when it comes to issue of plagiarism, as a supervisor, you'll have to account
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
one stage,
That's
And if you missed out on this training,
yeah.
how are you going to catch up?
through the recording.
Yeah, through the recording.
No,
But even in the
we want you
FHDC
here
meetings,
so that you are able to pose questions and so on,
but even in the FHDC meetings, there we also need to calibrate.
Exactly.
So if the inexperienced supervisors
Yeah,
are
I
not
mean,
here,
that's where they will just write
The thing is
no
that-
ethical issues. But when you dig deeper into the proposal, there are a lot of problems there,
yeah.
Mm.
you know.
But I mean, if you look at the list of people that should be here, you will see that it's everybody from the FHDC is basically on the list, is a supervisor. And then there are a lot of up and coming researchers that are also on the list. But why I received excuses from 2 people, the 2 people that have lined to their names. The rest of the people I haven't received any excuses from. So
And a few are also part-time, that only works on Mondays
yeah,
and Tuesdays.
that's a problem. So I do have an excuse from Tony, so I've got 3 excuses. Yeah. So Tony let me know and I told him he must then just watch the videos. Yeah, because now he has 2 students, so.
Let's move, because
Okay.
we are already 1 hour.
Okay. I think what we're going to do today is it needs to be discussed. I'll add a little bit about plagiarism in that I have on another presentation that we could do, which is quite important. But I want to talk about ethics. I'm going to talk about it, and I think people need to actually discuss that. As you say, one of the big things is when you look at the overall research questions, people may believe that there's no ethical concerns. I've worked with people on doctoral proposals at a comprehensive university that is not UNISA. You see how happily I deal with confidentiality here. That the guy wrote a proposal about chemical testing for cancer. Okay? And he described the columns, he described everything. His research, I mean, the procedures was all there, and it's just columns left and columns right and this kind of thing, organic chemistry till you get scared. And I couldn't pick anything up until I went through his budget. I gave a lot of squeals about the budget. In there, there's a line for purchase of cells. So I thought, what cells are you buying? Is it in, you know? No, it's live human cells, but it's ethically obtained. So it doesn't matter if it's ethically obtained, it still needs to be cleared. That was okay until I found the line for the maintenance of the mice. That he was going to give the cells to. At which point I had to be gently nursed back to calmness, but that's it. So it happens. That's one of the worst cases, but it's not the only case. The other thing is that supervisors believe, a lot of supervisors believe, if there's no obvious ethical issues, it doesn't have to go through ethical approval. Any form of research have to go through ethical approval. It will get approval easily if there's no issues, but it doesn't mean, because this is a risk process from the university, it doesn't mean you don't go through it. And I think one of the things that you're busy now is the formal delegation of authority, that you might in there say that MTech students will be approved at departmental level, could be approved at, or could be approved at faculty level. I'm not quite sure how it works. But at WITS, where I'm working with some of this, the honours research and the limited scope masters, which is like the MTech that do partial research, can be approved at school level. It has to go through exactly the same documentation, can be approved. So it can be recommended for approval by the head of school, or it can be forwarded to faculty. And the faculty could either approve depending on different requirements, or recommend that it goes through the university ethics committee. So the belief happens that it can happen, that you don't need to go through it. Is there anyone that's a research psychologist here? The one that really, if you, and I'll go through that now, if you registered at the Health Council as a research psychologist, you have to comply to the research ethics applicable for health professionals, that is the medical ethical, and those are really stringent. One of the people that was a research psychologist had the opinion that honours research doesn't have to go through ethics clearance as well. You go through and say, how can you do this? So the understanding about ethics is a very, very painful process. You find that some faculties, engineering is a favorite one, believe that there's nothing ethical about beating up a piece of concrete, or unethical, but there are aspects of it that's ethical. There's health risk, because it's not only harm to whatever you're studying, there's harm to the university, there's also harm to yourself. So there's a whole perspective in there, and the awareness of that is probably quite crucial. So, okay, stop my and maak my praat, whatever. Okay, so I'm going to talk about ethics, academic honesty, and I'll if necessary, I'll go on about plagiarism, ethics in research, and then with ethical dilemmas, what you need to do. If you bother to do even a Google search on research ethics, you'll find a variety of quick things. Get informed consent, get this, get that. But there's very little that really looks at what's underlying the whole ethical process. So ethics is basically this. And I mean, if you teach philosophy, we can go a heck of a lot deeper into it. But it is around the morals that govern a person's behavior. So the interpretation about what is right and what is wrong can be quite interesting. You can find that a lot of academics, especially the ones that are very dedicated to a certain area, could totally ignore the ethical issues or not even be aware of them. And that's a lot of the thing people would say, but why should I come and discuss ethics? It's not applicable to me. It is. And the problem is that if you don't guide a student appropriately, I know of a person, not the one on metallurgical, that has just been examined at a doctoral level and had to hand in ethical approval before she could get examined after she did research. She did the research on prisons, the building and design of prisons, but she spoke to prisoners. So it was major issues. At least she had the clearance from the prison authorities. So it was not that big issue, but if that wasn't in place, it wouldn't be examined before ethical clearance have been given. And if you retroactively ask for clearance and they have a problem with your instruments, your protocol, anything like that, all the data that you gathered and analysis is useless. You've got to start again. So it is quite important that sometimes you might believe that in your faculty it's not in place, but the drive for the universities to get in place is so big that it might just get in place at some very inconvenient time. And I think you are very busy at the moment in putting the things together. Okay. One of the things that comes up quite regularly is that if I don't work with medical issues or animal issues, there's really no ethics. But there is a thing such as professional ethics. And academia is a profession. So a lot of the professional ethics aspect is that you actually have to understand what is the ethics about being a professional. And if you look at academic dishonesty, that is something in most ethical procedures that just assume that it is there. You assume that you are behaving professionally ethical in any case, so we just have to make sure that the way that you gather the information, the way you use it, the way you dispose it, is not unethical. Doesn't go. So there's a lot of problems here. Also, that a lot of people focus so deeply on ethical clearance around gathering data that they do not understand the implications of reporting data. So I said here, I give a very clear example around that it does not really deal with confidentiality. What does it mean? I stand in a conference and I actually talk more detail about it. I write another little report. One of my biggest shocks around ethics before the one about the mouse was BTech students that did research on occupational health and safety, and a few months later I asked the guy now, and they were looking at violations, asked the guy now, how did it go? No, they have had formal disciplinary procedures against the guys. So you sit in a level that they use that information in a way that's not applicable. You can't do that if you do in ethics. The consequences is massive. Then you also deal with the fact that whenever you ask a person, have they committed a crime or anything that's a criminal act, and you know about it, you are accomplice. Okay. You do not go around saying that I am a Catholic priest, therefore they have confessed to me about that. If you have asked in a questionnaire or an interview to somebody, have you ever been bribed to get a contract, which one student were going to ask for around construction, and the guy said yes. You're part of this whole thing. So when you structure your questions, that's another thing. People are not aware of the fact that you can put yourself in danger about knowing certain things. So just that simple thing, and a lot of people, I mean, you start looking at behavior that could be slightly grayer than it should be. Do you want to know about it? And what happens to you if you want to know about it? Okay? And you can't go around having people criminally prosecuted afterwards. Neither can you go around just hiding it, because then you can end up in trouble. So let's look at academic cheating. So part of it, this is around professional behavior, and part of it is around plagiarism. We're going to talk about that just now. there's a lot of plagiarism that's unintended. Okay? You struggle with people that just rework something, or they can't paraphrase correctly, or they're sloppy in their references, or something like that. So it's not intended plagiarism, but it still happens to be plagiarism. And I can again go through the Hall of Shame if you just want to look at some of the consequences. But if we cannot guide our students don't understand either. And language proficiency is one of the key issues, that people cannot think how to articulate that thought. It's just not possible for them in English to translate that thought, and therefore they use the words that they know. They might not even realize, and that's when you go through the document, you struggle, and suddenly there's this brilliant piece. And you know, oops, doesn't matter. This comes from somewhere. This is the easiest way you pick up plagiarism is you take that bit, run it straight through Google, and up pops whatever comes out. So language becomes a massive issue there. And then also you deal with respect. In some cultures, it is regarded as respectful to cite directly, to use the words of whoever has been teaching you, to show respect for what they've said. It's not, it's not regarded as plagiarism. So if you sit with students coming in with that kind of mindset, they don't think they're doing anything bad. They're showing respect to you. But there are horror stories, there are many horror stories of external examiners sitting with documents and suddenly recognizing their own words. There's examiners who sat down, and I know of one specifically that tried to mark something from Unisa and Afrikaans and suddenly recognized it. It was very similar to another doctorate that he's been examined from America. It just happened in some form of English in America. So, you know, it's direct translation, large parts of it. Those things happen. Murphy is well and active. And if you don't know about it, if you don't know how your students have thought, it's very easy to become trapped. And students that go away from you and then come to you and suddenly give you a piece of work, you don't know where it come from. You don't know, I mean, and then you have to make sure that that is okay. Because if you pass it on, you're in trouble as well. Because you have to basically go through quality checking and feel, if you hand it in for examination, you're basically saying, this school. You hand it in for examination with major issues around plagiarism, you have a problem. So, and in fact, as a study leader, you have the same problem if there's ethical violations, because you have approved it. Fabrication and falsification, I mean, massaging of, to what extent are you allowed to massage your statistics? To help your statistics to look a little bit better, to throw out the outlier. A lot of that deals with the very, very thin line of how much of it is for the purpose of analysis and reporting, and how much of it is falsification of what you've received. So that becomes the issue. Fabrication of missing data. I mean, the first thing that you learn is this first year or second year, when you do any lab work in chemistry or wherever, when you start falsifying your data, to build in some level of error. Because there's nothing as suspicious as these perfect graphs. So when you see a perfect graph, I mean, you learn that, okay, this is what I should be getting. Now, how much error should there be in? Then you add the error. That's what students do. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of academics do as well to some degree or another. Just add a little bit. There's a lot of bribery. And we deal with this in the declaration. Am I going to feed the people if they come to my focus group? What's the implication if I make sure that I feed them very well and invite them to a next one if they give meaningful information? Then they can come again and I'll feed them very well as well. If you're dealing with some communities, that's serious bribery that you're offering there. So those things are also then included in what we look at ethically. This is basically the kind of things that a lot of books say about ethics, no harm. It also sounds like a Wiccan curse, but in any case, harm to subjects, no harm to research subjects, and no harm to the institution. And that's the biggest thing. I mean, you really want to get up one Sunday morning, get out the report in the Sunday Times, front page news, research at TUT shows. Remember what happened at UCT last week? No, never mind the donkeys. The UCT one where the students did a questionnaire where it was found in the students' research that they did for the newspaper that the students regard white women as most attractive. And second was colored women, third was Asian and black women were not regarded as attractive at all. That got published. Yeah.
But there were only 60 respondents.
Only 60 respondents. It was done by a university magazines, oh not magazine, the little newspaper, student newspapers. Alleged journalist didn't comply to anything ethical, and it featured front page UCT students. And that kind of stuff, these cases where people get information from students. I know recently at UJ one was found that didn't clear any ethical, and some lecturer regularly handed out every year about sexual behavior of UJ students, well, first years. You look at that, study at UJSA, study at TUT declares that, and you find out the guys used one sample, and whoever they listened to and bribed and had a lot of bias in reported something. This is still research done here. They pass it off as research. The fact that it's not ethical research is a risk to the university. Funding, especially big grant funding, and we'll go now why, is tied to ethics. Say somebody that, you look at the guys from the Mellon Foundation, big money, massive money, funds a lot of research, and they reward money to any department or any part of the university that might be highly specialized, and any other part of the university gets into trouble about ethics, that foundation is going to withdraw its money. So basically the contract state that all research at this institution happens in an ethical manner, and that institution is not limited to a part of the institution, it's the whole. So the enforcement throughout the university, the enforcement of ethical compliance or ethical application at all levels of research is basically linked to that funding, among other things, and the reputational risk. And if you don't care about your reputation, finding something like that in the Sunday newspaper, certainly you'll care about the money. I'm going to go through some of the ethical issues that is regarded as some of the seminal activities. The most one that I'll come back to is after the World War II, there was massive Nuremberg trials held where the German soldiers, most of the German soldiers all went through trial and were looked whether they had crimes against humanity, whatever. There was full trials. And there was what is called the doctor's trial, where a lot of research was, the alleged research was investigated there. And certain principles came out. And we'll get back to that now. But this is one of the key issues that was done. And you'll see where it started moving research. It started in 1932. They had 600, actually 598, I've been told. Not 600 guys were tested, African American males, for 40 years. Some of them had syphilis, some of them didn't have syphilis. They weren't told, they weren't treated, and they worked out how they died. Meaningful study, it's worthwhile, isn't it, to know what's the effect of syphilis? But it didn't really go down very well. The researchers knew that they were ill. They knew they could have treated them, but they didn't. And that's happened. Okay, so it was stopped. And now new medical research must have informed consent, but it's not, that informed consent is not based on what was found in 1972. It has an earlier history. The example that is probably the most interesting, the Stanford Prison experiment. This was done by a highly reputable researcher, a giant in the area. Okay, and he wanted to find out how people role play affect people's behavior. Meaningful search. So he used these students, everything fine. Male students 24, recruited, they were paid, And they were told randomly, you're either inmate or you're warden. They were picked up, they were thrown into jail. What happened after that? The wardens really enjoyed it. And they got very, very violent and very, very cruel. To a level that within a few days, I think it's within 2 days, the first person showed really acute stress, serious psychological damage, the first person that was a prisoner. They started, they hosed them, hosed them down with water, they beat them. The forms of torture they used was quite extensive. And the academic looking after that research was really, really excited, was so involved in it, it's so meaningful, it's so telling, it proves what he's saying, that he wasn't seeing that this was going bad. It took quite a while for people, the colleagues, to say, do you know what you're doing? Do you know what you're doing? And after 6 days, it had to be closed down. Now, the damage done in that 6 days, and you should look at that. And what it shows is this is a really credible researcher. But being so involved, he never stood back. He never looked back and never saw what's the implications.
On the wiki, under interesting web article on research, is that experiment and the YouTube video of it. It's very interesting.
It's very, very interesting, and it's a very good case study because it's not done by some Mickey Mouse guy in some Mickey Mouse corner somewhere. It was really done by reputable at Stanford University. And they should know better. Okay. I spoke about the Nuremberg Code. And when you start looking at ethics, it's very easy to look at these rules, but you have to understand why they were put in and what order. So it was the consequences of Nazi experimentation, and certain codes were put in. The 10 rules codes were actually set up. And I can read them quickly. Partly it's thou shalt not take your Jewish prisoners and kill them off until what time you have found out, see how they die. And the consequences, the first one that came out was about voluntary participation. They should have informed consent, they should have the legal capacity to participate, and they should be able to leave at any one time. If they're not in forever, they can leave at any time. There may be no coercion, whatever. Now, how often do we go around and we want to find out something and we give our students questionnaires to fill out, and we tell them they can leave the class after they've filled out the questionnaire? There's no informed consent, isn't there? So the university's rules around using your students as a source of data I think will be one of the most stringent, and they typically, for that kind of clearance, you have to have university level clearance. So the moment you use your students or any group of, or your students use the other students as samples, then you have to have clearance, definitely and without fail, because they are in a position that they are captive. The next one is around, any research must deliver fruitful results. So you can't go around doing research just because you feel like it. There must be something meaningful that's going to come from it, and there must be a high likelihood of something meaningful. So your research design, your proposal is quite important, because the people that give the clearance have to understand that you know what you're going to do and your results are going to be meaningful. So there's a lot of interrogation around what method are you following. Is there a good chance that whatever comes out there will be useful? It should be designed based on good knowledge. So you can't go around asking questions or doing experiments because you maybe have an idea that it could be something. There should be sound theoretical knowledge. What I do to students now is when they have an item in a data bank, they have to give the theoretical basics on which they base that item. So what theory makes them tell that if I answer this question, it's going to be, I'm going to get something that gives meaning. And a lot of the reasons people don't understand that the importance of that whole research proposal is because these judgments gets made on, have you done a thorough proposal? The next one is no unnecessary physical or mental suffering or injury. There must be no reason to suspect that death or a disabling injury can occur, especially where you are experimenting on yourself. Okay? And in the medicine area, very often medical researchers would quickly see if it works on them. Okay? And that's also illegal. You know, if you cause damage to yourself and you're experimenting, if it wasn't intended, you are committing a crime. And you are against ethical practice. So that becomes the issue. This research area has been, or this ethical concern issue about damage to self has been very well developed in anthropological studies, where you would go into a strange environment and hopefully hope that your subjects, research subjects, don't put you in a pot and cook you, or something around that effect. So it's very close there. And in your strictly lab scientific areas around occupational health and safety. That's the only areas, but it is important. That friend of mine that did her doctorate in the prisons, she had interviews that she did with permanently violent incarcerated people. And if you ask an incarcerated person, that's probably one of the most vulnerable subjects. But as she said, that sometimes she knew that she was a vulnerable person. Having a detailed account of how you've put a baby into a microwave is apparently quite damaging for a person if you've gone through those kind of things several times. So it's really serious. The degree of risk should be in line with what you're going to find out. Proper preparation must be made. And the experiment should also only be executed by a scientifically qualified person. Very often, if you deal in management, you ask things that have really serious psychological kind of impacts. And if you are not a psychologist that's trained and you go into interviews with people where you expose something or you get them into a major psychological state where you cause them to confess something or suddenly they reveal something that caused them strain, that is unethical. Never mind the damage that it does to you, it's unethical because the student or the person that you enroll in, you're not a competent practitioner to be doing that kind of study. And that's quite a difficult area. And in university-wide ethical committees, that's one of the biggest fights. So should you, because you in this department, be asking questions about these kind of things? You obviously don't know about these kind of things, but all the research in my kind of field talk about these things here. It gets really messy, and it gets very, very angry. And then they have to end at any time, and the process must be able to be terminated at any given time if something like the Stanford experiment or even remotely like this come up. So it must be monitored, and the participants and the researcher must have the right to withdraw from this. It's not they've received funding. If you withdraw now, the whole thing gets canned and you pay the money back. So that was basically, and that was in 47. And this guy did research for quite some time, until 1964, when there was a formal process where the Helsinki Convention dealt with research in medical field. Now this is quite fun and games. It's a World Health Organization process. It is morally binding on medical professionals. That is not only doctors, medical doctors, it's everybody else. And they went through a process. Initially, they took the Nuremberg Code and they added in that where you may not yourself have the mental status to give consent, a legal guardian may give consent and things like that. And where a legal guardian isn't available, a parent may give consent. And it carried on, and it carried on. And people were quite happy with it. Until 1975, that's after that syphilis study. There was a lot of issues around that, and then the issue of an independent committee came in. When you have something, there should be an oversight by an independent committee, and in all medical research, you have to have an independent committee, and it's recommended that when you're doing any kind of research that may change, that takes a long time, that this is reviewed periodically, independently, so that you review that. Then they had some smaller revisions in 83, 89. Happily, everything worked. So up to that revision is accepted by America. It's actually acknowledged by the European ones. Isn't formally whether they don't accept it, but it's not mentioned in their medical research. But then big money in the pharmaceutical area took in. First thing was, never mind the syphilis study, they had what was the AIDS study, major AIDS study, that they did on mother-to-child transfer, proved 70% effectiveness, and the control group that they didn't treat was in Africa. The guys that they did treat was in America. So there was quite a lot of things around placebos, use of placebos around that, and it carried on. Later it went around, if you had an alternative, you can't use placebos if there's a better alternative. Then it went on to deal with, there's about 6 or 7 versions now. Then it went on to deal with if you have received benefits, say you've been, during the trial, been treated, you can't withdraw that benefits, which of course the medical guys don't really like, and also around social. Really, really boring, isn't it? But these are the principles that underlie it, and if you don't understand that, then those questions in your ethical form makes absolutely no sense. They ask informed consent. Why? Where? They ask protocol. Why? Where? So it's very, very important, and it guides what we do. These are the underlying principles. And finding any source that gives you these principles overall is difficult, because people will just say, in this faculty you look at these things, in this faculty you look at these things. But when you look at a university-wide thing, you have to be consistent. And management tend to be an area where the types of research, the field is so wide that you are likely to violate some principles somewhere. Okay, even if you use financial figures, then you can do damage to the company which you're analyzing, reporting on. There's integrity, which is the first ethical. There's respect, there's benefit, there must be benefit. Remember, there must be sufficient benefit, otherwise you don't do it. There's a responsibility of the aspects and consequences. There must be scientific validity, there must be justice, and around academic freedom and dissemination. Now, when you sign that contract with your student, one of the things there is around publication. Okay. When are you the lead author? When is your student the lead author?
Student is always the lead author.
There's different rules, and there's different ways that it gets applied. And you find academics that insist that they're the lead author. In some cases, the rule is that in the first paper, the academic should be the lead author, because that is typically supposed to happen in the first year, where a lot of guidance is given. But after that, the student is. And that's not clear, and that things get really, really messy. The Helsinki Protocol is binded. I've spoken about that. Now, the highest authority is the Senate, and people look at a variety of ways to get around that, but the Senate delegates its authority. Okay. So there has to be a formal process. For the purpose of this proposals, we're not going to really say that follow any specific process. We're going to follow a fairly rigorous process to ensure that it complies whatever TUT comes up with in the end. And there's no harm. And there must be involvement, engagement. There's application forms typically, but those application forms, if they're 1 page, they have a 10-page manual on how to complete them. Because people don't, this little boring bit about the basic principles underlying things, it's the way that anybody feels about basic principles. and you must provide documentation. So some people think, why should I not only hand in my item, my questionnaire? Because it must be verified that you're going to do something meaningful and that it will be a proposal. So what we're going to do is we expect the students to hand in their proposal documentation, and then we have an internal review, the review that is per departments. So in that review, they are going to get formative feedback, and they're going to get formative feedback from a wide range. Now this experience will be unpleasant to a number of supervisors that is not willing to start looking, have other people look at it, and there's a lot of insecurities. So are you willing to have the other members, the other supervisors in your department look at what you've done? And a lot of academics are uncomfortable with that. But unless one can start engaging in that in a mature fashion, you cannot develop communities of scholarship. And you've got to start pulling those things together. Then we're going to ask the students to complete the design protocol. So if I had to take them through full ethical clearance, I would then have worked with them until they had the designs and protocols written up, and they can informed consent, introduction to the study, all the documentation that's necessary in the completed ethical application, and then they can gather data. So at this point, at the proposal documentation, we are going to have the basics of the ethical application in place. So we're continuously going to look at that, but this process then needs to continue, and people need to be aware of that. We stop at that top one. Okay. So what have to happen after that? Obviously, after the ethics, because it's going to be the internal feedback, then it goes to the faculty committee, and the student will have a lot of feedback. He will get from his direct supervisor, he'll get from the oral assessment, and he'll get from the faculty. And that then has to be taken into account, and feedback has to be recorded. I'm pretty neurotic about students keeping feedback records so that they know what's been said to them, etc. You deal with students that do it, but especially if you deal with multiple supervisors, it becomes really, really messy about who really gets to say what's happening. And it's probably one of the most traumatic experiences for any student, is to have multiple supervisors that actually go for each other as opposed to for the work. He wants to cut. Talk to them and tell them about the research, read your introduction, or tell them your introduction, get the informed consent, and then fill out the form. So we don't know which other things are in place and how you're going to analyze it. So the protocols are quite important, and a lot of students find that a pain to write, and a lot of supervisors as well. In any research, this is a pain in the butt. It's like any specification. Thou shalt breathe in this order. But this is what you can do if you want to carry on and you want to repeat that study. That's very, very important if you look at the reliability of your study, because you need to know, to get this information, I have followed this protocol. You need to be able to go through that. It talks about the collection. You have to incorporate in your background. Then what you put typically into a ethics application is your informed consent, okay? And informed consent is very often for people very difficult. One of the first things is that you must be really informed. That means that the words that whoever is written or read to them, the participant must be able to understand it. I've seen one informed consent drawn up by a person doing a doctorate in optometry that used words, and she was going to send this little letter to the parents of rural schools. The parents would have read that letter and signed it. I didn't understand all the words. Okay? I definitely didn't understand all the words. It was really scary. And I can read. So you deal with that, and very often those assumptions are made quite quickly. You give them a thing, they will read it. Sometimes you have to read it to them. They have to sign with the X. How are you going to do? How are you going to get the informed consent? You can't say, I'll take photos of them and then I guarantee them anonymity. you know, there's a lot of issues around that. So they must be informed. You must not coerce them by having, and one of the forms of coercion which the honor students do when they do in groups is the prettiest one with the shortest dress go and get the information. And as I said, I've worked with a person that did her doctorate research and said that she used the long hair, short dress approach to get the information. That's coercion. Okay. They must be able, she doesn't probably agree with me, they must be able to withdraw any form, and you must actually have that consent, and in some way you have to have a record of that consent. So if there's any chance, you must be able to look at that. You must have the complete introduction to the research. I will send examples of that. There are examples. I'm at this place, this is what I do, da 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 da. So when you want access to a company, you have to understand that informed consent does not only apply to the people that you're talking to. The company itself must have signed off that introduction sheet that you are free to use that information. So informed consent also has layers, and you have to have a full and detailed introduction, but your introduction to your other informed consent might be shorter. Becomes to be an issue if you don't want to bias people, so you don't actually want to tell them about what the research is so that you get information. How are you introducing the research if you don't want to tell them what you're researching? If you can't tell them what you're researching until you bias, it's a bit messy there. And then you have to get the permission forms. Then what I'm going to do them, and I think it's important to just go, you've got a piece of paper in front of you. That form is what we use in one place as on the level of the school. So when this application goes to the school, it is not the formal one that, say, the university would use, but it is attempting to guide the student in what should be considered, and more than that, it attempts to make it possible for the ethics committee to give meaningful formative feedback. I know of people, if you do research in psychology, you're going to take nearly a year to get approval. Okay. And then it comes back from the ethics committee and it says, not good enough. And you don't know where, you don't know what. So the feedback is quite important. So the first thing is there must be certain documentation attached. The application form of whatever format. A short issue where the students have to give an overview of the ethical concerns in this research so that you can see if they've picked up all the ethical concerns. Very often you are possibly blind, such as that student with the mice. His supervisor was a very, very strong academic person in chemistry and really has never worked with live animals. Then you have to have your proposal, and you cannot go around giving abbreviated proposal because certain of the checks that must be done, you need the full proposal. Then we'll go to the Annexure A, which is just a summary sheet once again on what you've done with the detail. B, C, and D, E. So A, which is the next,
This is proposal.
Yeah, A is the proposal, sorry, and it's really, you're looking at these things. So overall, have the ethics issues been identified? Is there possible harm? And it's yes, no, and has this been addressed? So you must identify it and you must address it. So informed consent is not the way to do ethics. Informed consent is the way that you address a certain concern. We're currently working at UJ on understanding what the status of supervision is, and we want to get information on departmental level. Okay? But that information could be quite sensitive as to the supervisor. What do you think is the basis whereby students get allocated to academics? To what extent do you think that you are supported by your department? Now, if you're about 5 possible supervisors in a department or even less, you're not going to answer that. So in those, we have to aggregate, we have to separate its instruments. So we have one instrument that we have per department level, one where they don't declare where they come from, a whole mixture of these things.
Sorry, I also have a question. With that consent,
Hmm?
many don't want to sign. They say they would like to take part in the
Yeah,
study.
and
But they don't
then the way
think
that you put them, by participating, it will be assumed that you've given informed consent. Your protocol will say that you've read them, they've given verbal consent, they had the opportunity to withdraw, they've continued. That's why the protocol is so important there. And your informed consent, you typically design an informed consent per instrument that you use. So it's not a single informed consent that you use whether you have a qualitative, long detailed interview or whether you have a multiple survey monkey kind of thing. It's a different form that you would use, and you need to be specific to every instrument, every data gathering opportunity that you followed it. So your protocol is also very, very specific. Now, identification of participation of communities. It comes from that whole issue around syphilis, the whole issue around AIDS, and placebos, and giving people treatment and then withdrawing the treatment. But if you have been involved in a community and then you're withdrawing, either you're giving them lower than the professional service, or you're withdrawing, that becomes a big story. Conflict of interest. Now this is a thing that very often students forget and academics forget. One of the things is that you use your parents' company, construction, they did that, the one guy, and you ask the workers how happy they are with management. So there's quite often there's a slight little bit of conflict of interest. If you're asking, you'll know, if I don't know how you do your surveys of your classes, but it's very formally done. The forms come in, they sealed, the class rep have to stand there, hand it out, taken this. The supervisor or the teacher is never supposed to see that. There's whole procedures around that. Also sponsors. Your sponsors may require you to massage the information, especially with part-time doctoral and master students, because these guys very often use their companies, and the companies won't like them to change the information. Or more than that, and I think in the MBA it's particularly so, they might change companies. I have one doctoral student that changed companies. He's restarted. He was a data analysis.
It's quite common.
Yeah, so it is a major issue. So you have to have that informed consent from the beginning to cover your butt, and you have to find out if there could be potential interests. And it is massively around your sponsor. Another thing that some universities insist, that I know at WITS the one thing that they want is, if there's any research like this currently happening in the university, you may not do that because you can muddy the water. So if there's any chance that your research could damage other research currently approved, it gets disapproved. I mean, that's highly frustrating. Wonderful research, but you are going to get into a conflict of interest situation. Okay. Then there's occupational health and safety issues, and then there's intent of the researcher has declared his intent to start with it, which is process. And then the last one, the supervisor has approved the ethical concerns, which means that when your student makes an ethical application, it's not your student that makes it, and that's where the real thing comes. You are making it with your student. So the supervisor is very, very involved. So it's really important for the supervisors to be comfortable and know all these nasty little things that you may not think about, so that it goes through, because it's highly embarrassing to get your student stuff thrown back with things that you should have known. A is the thing. B, we're looking at discrimination. You see the detail what we're looking. It's discrimination, vulnerable people massively. Vulnerable, a person, is it a child, is it a disabled person, is it an incarcerated person, or legally restricted, so, or aged, or whatever. Is that a vulnerable person? And if you deal with vulnerable people, then the permission is even more difficult. Can you get informed consent? Are you going to sit there and you're going to make an informed judgment in fashion? You're going to make an informed judgment of whether somebody's wearing fashionable shoes, which is a topic that a doctoral person is looking at. The fashionable shoes, the design of fashionable shoes for larger women, for professional affordable fashionable shoes. So you're looking at the dimensions. You can look at it from a purely ergonomic perspective, you know, how big it is. Then you can look at the height of it. But the basic thing is, what is fashionable? Now, if you look at what is, never mind that. Ever since I got told in Lafayette, in Paris, that I must go to the section for larger women, I had a complex about this, but I had a real serious complex. Yes, according to the French woman, I am larger. You know, you can't.
I don't think I'll go to Lafayette next time.
I mean, yeah, I know. There are the largest size clothes, and if I go into the far end of the rack, there's maybe one or two things that I could possibly wear, but it's very traumatizing.
Not even fitting anything there.
Okay, so so what's larger woman? But if you want to say if somebody has fashionable shoes, now you're not going to walk and ask a person, may I say if your shoes are fashionable or not? You know, in those cases, you are not necessarily going to be able to get informed consent, and that should be, you should be able to say, I will not get informed consent, therefore. You know, observations typically. If you go and do health and safety observations at the company, obviously you'll have to get permission from the company to do that, but you don't have to get permission from every person that is doing something on whether they're wearing PPE or not. Now I've got the next page missing.
Sorry, this one is double-sided.
Double-sided. The next one really then goes around confidential data. The biggest issue is not around how you keep it and how you distribute it, but also how you destroy it. And if you deal with research, you have the obligation to have your data available for verification at any time, for replication or verification. However, in some cases you have to destroy that. If you make notes, if you have handwritten notes, if you say have taken videos of something, you may be required to destroy that for confidentiality, because if you've said, I'm not going to say who it is and I'm going to code it, and you give the original data pieces to somebody, there's going to be issues around that. So the destruction protocol might be required. And you can't go around destroying things because you've done sloppy research. Foreseeable chance of psychological or social harm to the participants. Are you going to give payments or gifts? Very often, I mean, in medical research, you pay students to give blood or something like that. To what extent is that compensation or is that payment? Are you giving them money for their transport, or are you giving them money to come over and to come talk to you? What is it that you're doing? There's the whole issues about community. I've spoken to that. Are you going to give them service? Are you going to take it away? Have they participated in it? To what extent is that? And how are you going to deal with that? Very often, if you deliver a service and then you withdrew it, there's some major issues. So you can't go in and you deliver a service to your community and after you finish, you leave. The conflict of interest, pretty straightforward. And then the occupational health and safety issues, or the damage to the researcher. And I think that is where researchers very often forget. I've got another friend that's also busy with her doctorate, and she's working with mosquitoes and malaria. And one of the ways they're looking at it with non-malaria bearing, they have to, every female mosquito has to have a blood meal before they can lay eggs. So they have to give them a blood meal. So they have the official little guinea pigs that has to be shaved, is properly sedated, held with their tummies next to the cages, etc. However, most of the students after a while just do just go around, and that's harm to themselves. But I mean, that's a practicality. If you have to first find guinea pig, sedate guinea pig, according to protocol, shave guinea pig stomach, hold guinea pig to be and recover guinea pig, then your arm is a much easier solution. And very often we forget about the damage that we do to ourselves.
You might give yourself malaria.
You might just give yourself malaria or something. Those are the questions that I've gone. So anything else that somebody wants to do? Or should we deal with the plagiarism, or is that okay? You want to deal with plagiarism as well?
Oh, don't we have a session on Turnitin specifically?
Yeah.
We can cover it. It's better for us those who have come.
Yeah,
We have time, so,
to do it later.
no, do it now.
I want to deal with some specific issues. Let me just get this. Stana, Ivan.
You'll have to repeat whatever again in the plagiarism.
Yeah.
section then.
This is just some of it, and it deals with.
One quick question.
I just have an ethics-related question.
Yeah, please.
What about proposing motivation for increasing response rate? Prizes and that type of stuff?
That's bribery.
Not much.
That's not.
That is bribery. That is rewarding participation. That's rewarding participation, and that has to be ethically cleared. So if you do that in marketing, okay, where there's no damage or anything like that, that possibly get cleared. And marketing companies don't do ethical clearance, and a lot of those tend to be pretty suspect at the best of time. But if the university goes, or from a reputable research organization, if you go around doing that, the question is, are you going to reward that, or what are you going to go around there with your shortest little dress and smile at them in order to get them to respond better?
Yeah, but taking into consideration electronic questioning, so short, dress, and long is not going to have any influence. But there's a raffle there.
Declare it and see what the
See what the ethical
committees say.
say.
I can tell you if
Don't break your fingers.
your ethics committee includes some of the guys from psychology, you're not going to get it passed. It depends, it depends, because there's different research traditions. The guys that do marketing may get it passed. Certainly, any medical person on that panel, not a chance. Not a chance. The thing is, if you registered as a research psychologist, you have to abide by the research ethics. So if you don't do that properly, you can be struck from the role.
And if you're sitting on that panel and it's approved by a panel, then you're also online.
So they
You
tend.
have to take these things a little bit serious.
Just want to get that one. It sounds ridiculous, no, but it's.
I have a doctoral student that's registered at UNISA, and it's extremely difficult to get companies to give their consent.
Yeah.
The questionnaires to be distributed, and it's their viewpoint is that as long as there's no money involved, if you can say for every 10, if you have so many respondents in your company, we're giving you a research-based book. I know.
Yeah, I'd be worried because it's your name as well if it's your student. That's the things. Let me just get to whether I can get to the.
But you can always say that the results of the study will be shared with you.
That's
something like that. That is not
No.
possible.
No, that's not right.
You saying?
The results of this study will be shared.
Okay, let me just get that.
No, that's not
They are
right.
motivated to participate, and should they get the result, should you require the result will be shared with you,
Okay.
right to us.
Yeah, no, but that is about.
It's not the reward of coalition.
No, that's not. That is about dissemination.
So
That's about dissemination. What you're going to do with it, and there you have an ethical responsibility.
but that can motivate the response,
Yes.
higher response rate.
That can motivate, and that's encouragement. But I mean, the fact is, some of those things you have to share the information with respondents. Should respondents want to have that, you may not. You may have to include there that you will not share the information about other respondents with the.
No, what would be shared is the results of
Yeah.
the study in
Yeah.
aggregate form, not
The
the.
amalgamated results.
Yeah, but that is, you've got to specify that then when you deal with what you're going to do. I've now messed this bloody thing up, sorry.
Would you be interested the results of this study would be shared with you? The summary of the study,
Yeah.
not the whole study, unless they pay.
Yeah, no, they can't get the whole study. You're not doing industrial, you're not,
Summary of the study will
Yeah.
be shared.
You're not doing industrial espionage. You know, it's a really serious.
I have always doubt on this informed consent. Does it take away anything? Because for other damages there are ways. But if you are telling this is going to damage you, and if the person agrees, has that damage gone by just signing the document?
I don't think so.
So is the informed consent
can't-
doing anything?
I can't find the blinking
Well,
finger.
I don't think that the university's ethics panel is going to allow you to
No,
do the
let's not
research.
talk the administrative issue, let's talk the principle. Will the informed consent,
No.
does it take away anything?
No.
So why do we stick to it unnecessarily?
Informed consent, if you do it, what is
But
it?
He's saying that if somebody gives you their informed consent,
Yeah.
but you harm them through doing your research, does the informed consent
Do
basically
anything.
take away your liability?
So,
No, but it goes very seriously to the ethical committee and possible
let's
damage.
not talk the channels and the power.
No, the thing is, if it has, the ethical committee has the obligation to ensure that whatever you're going to do have no chance of harm.
That's fine, but those obligations have to be translated in a logical manner. And if this instrument of informed consent is not serving any purpose,
It has to, because the ethics committee has to go through that lot and say, yes, what the student or what the researcher is going to do there is okay. And if the ethics committee is short, how do I get this?
let's talk the merit of the case.
You
not
need
the-
help.
Yeah, I need to get this to move. I've got it in a,
If
I'm trying to
give you
print a,
ethical clearance and you mess up,
ek wil hierdie net uitkry en ander die enige bring.
even the signature of the participant,
That's a different issue.
then
I'm talking
Okay,
about
I'll
merit.
come here.
Ek weet nie wat daar van die
I'm
ding was
actually
nie.
and I'm saying we will shoot you in your foot. Okay, you agree to it. And we shoot you and we damage you and then is the informed consent helping?
No, the informed consent is not helping. The whole issue is then the ethics committee that allowed you to go gather that stuff has the liability. So the poor person on that ethics committee that has been appointed, legally appointed in some cases,
You are giving me an administrative and legal answer, not the meritorious answer.
the meritorious issue is you so deep in shit, boy child, you will never get out of there again and nobody is going to trust your research again. You have damaged your reputation.
No, I'm talking the merit.
and what happened to that?
What merit?
student?
Ethics is not a business issue.
I'm asking, is the informed consent helping us anywhere? That's fine,
What's the same as with your national
you're
security?
not hearing what I'm trying to say.
When you national security presenter, you're going to present the program on state. No state.
And you agree with
I can't get this blinking thing to work. Who knows how to get this thing to work? It,
That's what I'm saying, but if you,
nee, dit is 'n wat ek saam met iemand anders gedoen het. I want to get into your
Close
memory
that.
stick. Close that. I want to get into your memory stick.
it's fine, we'll get in there. Where is computer?
Yes, sir.
Do you want to get into the stick?
Yeah.
If the research
It doesn't want to give me the stick. It gives me. It doesn't pick up the stick. Maybe the.
It will be, let's refresh.
That to refresh because otherwise you just pull it out and put it in again because it doesn't. You switch application.
Yeah.
That's why it's gonna get it now.
Okay. But yeah. I'm sorry, I can't get it to talk to me. Maybe we must put it in another
In the
port.
other one port.
That one.
This is not USB.
That's it.
There it
There
goes.
it goes. There it goes.
There's it go. Let me just get the right one. What go be academic?
Let's have few minutes break.
2 moment. they said, okay, he's not going to be disciplined, he resigned. However, about 5 months later, he was found guilty of fraud and embezzlement, or charged with fraud and embezzlement by his funders. So things bite you in various ways. There are also cases where people have been professors at universities for some time and then found to have plagiarized in their doctorals. And okay, so let's look at that.
Afterwards, they found out.
20 years later, full professor, wonderful reputation, head of school. And there was a minister, there was this one minister, I think it's a German minister, same thing, bye, lost his post. Sorry? No, this was a German guy, okay. So this is massive, we're going to talk about the ideas. Plagiarism is really the act of presenting somebody's work as your own. That's all that it is. The legal issue, and I think that is probably sometimes one of the fun bits, plagiarism means kidnap. The word is kidnap. You have kidnapped somebody else's thoughts, and you have illegally or whatever, fraudulently obtained it. So around, and the reason this one works like that is around Wikipedia, it's not a very solid search. Okay. So.
I tell my students, I'm allowed to use it because I'm the professor, but you're not.
I tell them Wikipedia is a great start. If you don't know what the theme, you hit Wikipedia, then you go to the references, and then you snowball from that references until you know what it's about. But it's a good point to start. Okay. Somebody else's word, there's no get-out clause. I know of more than one person that has been fired due to plagiarism. There are some universities that actually takes the case if a student has plagiarized and the academic has approved the examination for that quite serious. It becomes a little bit of an issue because you cannot really say it's plagiarized when it's a draft. And the only point that they can prove that it's plagiarized if he's submitted for examination. So, if they're submitted for examination, but the academic hasn't picked it up, it's a big issue. That's why we use Turnitin. Basically, to get yourself covered. Your get out of, I have taken all the necessary precautions to make sure. And when they do their literature review specific, which is the one that they write quite detailed, that's going to go through Turnitin. Automatically, there's no question asked. But you will have to be able to decipher Turnitin in order to take the due process. But you are at risk, and sooner or later somebody's going to take it seriously and say that you had the responsibility. At this point, the NQF level that say the student has to take full accountability covers you to some level at doctorate level. But your due diligence is the issue, and people are too scared to touch it. Universities are too scared to touch it because then it opens the university to legal cases by the students. That the students said, but you should have picked it up. So it's an issue. In whose court?
Excuse me, what exactly? I know if a student, for example, sat there and have 10 different books and use it the right way, but didn't change the word.
I'm going to go through that now. Yeah.
The second point does not mean.
You do not copy words. So let's go through that. There is deliberate plagiarism. And unfortunately, when it gets to going into a legal level, it gets a bit of an issue. Deliberate plagiarism is when you rewrite. In other words, you copy. Rewrite it from that. You paste it from web sources with patchwork it, or you buy a paper and you translate it. Accidental plagiarism could be if you are not competent in paraphrasing, which is a massive issue around people with language competencies issues. If you don't know when to cite, which is why we train people so diligently. As trainer, you've signed off, so you're supposed to know it. And one of the big things is what is common knowledge. Now, if you look at it, one of the biggest things that you can do is you've been reading so much, and somewhere, some article phrased it so beautiful. this term just really got it for you. Okay, and that's come into your common knowledge. And you use it. Is that then plagiarizing, or is it not plagiarizing? And
If you don't cite the source, then it's plagiarism.
yeah, but you don't even know that you're plagiarizing. That has stuck into your mind as a way to describe something. You read it, you didn't even realize that 10 years ago when you read that book, that term got stuck in your mind, it got the way that you articulate it. And you use that description when you write.
But
Yeah, but then-
sorry, is there any difference in the consequences of the
No.
negligent accidental?
No.
That's
No, but in accidental we can train. In accident.
But then you cite under author not known. If you can't remember.
If you remember that you've picked it up somewhere, if you realize that this was not someday when I sat in the bath and floated away and got this beautiful thought in my own mind. I got it somewhere, but you can't remember what you've read 10 years ago, but you don't know. You think it's your own words.
Then I say, no, it's unknown source.
Then it is
Yeah.
your own words. It's not plagiarism to my mind.
Depends to what extent. Very often you find that you could quote somebody's words pretty directly, and it's not a term that's in common knowledge.
Different way.
But people think the same.
But are you allowed to state facts without referencing?
No.
The issue there is what is common knowledge. You're allowed to state common knowledge.
Or it could be accident, the way two people think.
It could be, but that you've got to prove, and that becomes a very, 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 very serious issue. So remember, in Turnitin, we're not going to say that at 1% plagiarize, you're going to kill that whole thing.
50% up to 50%.
No.
Nope.
It depends.
Nope. Now you've got to take the things out. You have to
That-
take certain things out, and typically, if you quote law, if you have law in your,
Then
it's going to
it's
come
fine.
plagiarized. It's just going to come over and over and over because the way you quote it.
That Turnitin program is a very dangerous instrument if you don't know how to work.
Yeah. You have to interpret with it, and it picks up. Say you've got a template, it picks up the whole template as plagiarized. You've plagiarized this. It's on record that this is a document. So you.
And if you scan the document and 2 months later it will pick up that
Yeah.
document. And then it's
Yeah.
plagiarism of
Yeah.
plagiarism.
Self-plagiarism.
Self-plagiarism.
100%.
But that is the problem.
That's why. That's why you
we
need.
have to have a session on it so that we all get on the same page. What do we mean by plagiarism in Turnitin?
And how, what things can you take out? So you'd go through that manually, you receive it. It's gone through that, and here it is. You have to remove certain things.
But do you see it now about the program itself?
You then-
Because sometimes you have to use it twice or thrice
Yeah,
or
but then
something.
it's marked in certain way.
Okay, but that's the thing.
There's ways to switch it off. Then it marks up. It has two ways that there's various views. You can have the script marked up with references at the back, or you can have a list of what is plagiarized on page. There's different ways that you can look at it. Then you go through it, and you have to make your judgment call now and say, this is it. Is it? What is this? Can it be disregarded, or can't it be
And
disregarded?
that's what the session on Turnitin will be about, is how do we go through that and how do we decide what is acceptable and what is not acceptable.
And it's very dangerous. It is flippin' dangerous if you don't know how to use it.
I put a book through Turnitin, book that I wrote, a textbook, and it showed certain sections that I got from no source. It was
Yeah.
completely my own intellectual property, and it showed as somebody else's.
And that's when you have those
Common
maps.
knowledge.
When it's either common knowledge or it's a phrase, and then it's got to be considered. So typically, I use a buffer of 10%.
10 is too low.
10 is not too low. You flip an MBA type. No, you talk about the consequences. No, 10 is not too low. 10 is not too low. At a doctoral level, 10 is.
Including literature review.
Can you
You've got to quote. The moment you quote it, the moment you use quotations and citing correctly, it does not pick it up. So one of the things students use it for, and there's a lot of debate on it, you put it through and it picks up where you have done sloppy referencing. So remember that whole thing, sloppy referencing. And then you go through that, you go through your own report, you said, oops, and you fix it. A lot of students use it for that purpose, to pick up, and academics as well, to pick up sloppy referencing.
Can you plagiarize your own work?
Yep.
Yes. No.
Bottom one, recycling your own paper. It has been published. You can't just claim that it's a new thing.
The moment that you publish, the intellectual property goes to the journal.
But I mean, you know, this deliberate plagiarism, my supervisor, when I was busy with my PhD, gave me a document to read. And he said, this is the work of one of my students, and I'm giving it to you because you're doing the same type of methodology. And this is his methodology chapter, and this is just to help you. But I didn't really give it to you, you know.
Yeah.
And I started reading this guy's thing. And when I read it, something triggered in my mind of something else that I'd read. And I went and got out that paper. This guy had, and this paper was a summary of that methodology.
Yeah.
This guy had typed in that paper word for word and had used it as his methodology.
Yeah. So,
No, it was
Somebody
one
else
of
did.
my colleagues that had done this. But there were no consequences in the end, but yeah. These things happen, and the thing is that you as the supervisor will not necessarily read everything in the field, because the student might not be 100% in your field.
or you might need it in another language. That's one. A lot of these things that are being picked up is articles or things that were in other languages that were translated, so English to Afrikaans or whatever. And now those things are available. They are being translated. They are available.
Especially from German.
Yeah.
It's from German, there's a lot of.
And so, I mean, as an academic, I mean, my supervisor was so glad when I phoned him up and I said, I don't know how to tell you this, but this is what I picked up. And he was so glad because he is not an expert in that methodology,
Yeah.
and he didn't read the papers on the methodology, so he would never have picked that up.
And it's a major mess. And it's easy to see plagiarism and see black and white. Some things it's not black and white. And some things you can train, you can make people aware of, but the consequences are still pretty bad if you've overstepped. Any of those is plagiarism.
And tell me one thing, sometimes the students continue 2 pages from one reference, 143 page, 144.
That is bad practice, unless it's direct citation of, in law. The legal. If you ever want to drive yourself nuts, read a legal PhD. It is a pain. It is really, I mean, the way they present things, the way they argue. They don't use literature. Sometimes they use literature. Sometimes it is, it's a messy plot. So it's very, very difficult. But it's messy style. If you can't say it in your own words, that's why you have to be competent to articulate it. If you have to use so much of somebody else's articulation, is it because you can't articulate it yourself?
But then does it not amount to copying, not plagiarism, but copying?
No, that amounts to bad academic practice. If you've referred it, it's referred. He acknowledges it's not his, so it's not plagiarism, but it's bad practice. Okay, so that is quite important. The next thing is, if we just go through it, these are guys that have recently been found out.
Oh, my name is not there.
Thank goodness.
High profile people. I mean, these are, note, professor, ex-professor.
University of Wits.
One is Indian, one is American,
Yeah, there's a whole lot.
one is Shanghai,
She collects them.
all over, east, west, north.
This is all over. There's a lot. I mean, there's a lot. So what happened? This one, bottom one, read that. Publish out of the student's thesis.
Degree was also revoked, that must be Indian.
Okay.
Plagiarism, fabrication, and falsification.
Yep. So these are major issues, and people don't quite, you know, you can very easily happen. That was a This is just,
Copying your thesis.
yep. We have wonderful ones. So you have plagiarism outside. And you have all those other things. I'm not really going to go through that. So the reality of this is that plagiarism is something that's not cut and dry. The students, and I've first copied their marks, now I'm trying to copy it per group so that we can look at that from where the problems is. Plagiarism is not something they're familiar with. They really don't get it. And a lot of academics also don't get it because there are so many nuances in this whole story. It's not a black and white thing. And really, if you start at a doctoral thesis, if you start getting higher than 20%, there is serious issues in there. Some universities might accept it, but you don't know at what university you're going to teach later. And they could pick you up and they can find you guilty, and then you have nothing. So basically.